The Phobos strike team, released in what was considered a fairly weak state due to them having too many options for their action points, they have seen several sizable buffs to bring them up to competitive levels. We will be taking a look at where they are in terms of the Q1 2023 data slate, where they received some of their biggest buffs so far. As time moves inevitably forward, Games Workshop will release more balanced data slates, so don't forget to check my other videos to get up to date with any of the changes for this or any of the teams we go over here at the Chimerix project. If you're into a fairly survivable team but want them to have a good slew of trickery up their sleeves, the Phobos may be perfect for you, offering up many specialists with a bevy of abilities to approach any situation with. Before we get into it, if you're interested in Kill Team and potentially 40k and other tabletop games, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, maybe a like if you're so inclined. That being said, let's take a look at what the Space Marines consider to be stealth. There is a good bit to go through here. The Phobos are a little interesting in that they have one universal function and a bunch of abilities that work for specific types of the 3 variations of Phobos Marines. We'll start with the universal, Guerrilla Warfare. All Phobos units have the ability for one action point to change their order. This is limited to any turning point after the first. As well, the unit can't be within 3 inches of an enemy. Useful in hit and fade situations, but also important in a very specific ploy. More on that later. Next up is Saboteurs. This is only part of a Tac-Op function and is only useful when that Tac-Op is in play. It is worth noting though that the Saboteur and Mine Layer units have a slightly better ability to use this, as they can do it while in engagement. Terror is an ability that saw a buff a couple data slates ago, specifically reducing its cost to 0. This ability is only usable by the Reavers, which is good as they tend to be on the front line. It causes enemies within 3 inches to have to spend an extra action point when performing mission or pickup actions. It doubles as a sort of icon bearer function. When within range of an objective marker and looking to determine control, all enemies on the same objective are considered to be 1 less APL. This is just for control. It's not a modifier that plays into how many action points they have when activating. Now, we move over to some passives. The multi-spectrum array is used by the Incursor type Phobos and assists with the line of sight rules a little. In particular, it prevents enemies from using obscuring to prevent incoming fire. This is slightly abusable, and we'll go over that. It also circumvents smoke being able to prevent incoming fire, which is useful as the Phobos have access to smoke grenades. The Omni Scrambler is used by the Infiltrator type Phobos and can prevent enemies from activating right away during the turning point. This is used during the strategy phase as a sort of strategic ploy that costs nothing. Useful since it allows you to see what your opponent is planning before spending any points. All it needs is a visible line drawn from a unit with the Scrambler to the enemy selected. This makes the enemy GA1 and prevents it from going for a total amount of activations based on how many Omni Scrambler units are on the field. Quick note, if the enemy team has a bunch of GA2 units, based on wording alone, if you set an enemy with a 2 Scrambler debuff, activating both units in a GA2 group, I believe, counts in clearing the 2 Scrambler debuff, freeing it from the limit but not the GA1 until the following turn. This is very powerful, and don't underestimate it. It makes it hard for enemies to push up on the front line without risking being picked off without recourse. These 5 abilities are what make the Phobos tick, and makes them very unique when compared to other teams. We'll go over a lot of the interactions when we take a look at the many units available to them, but let's take a look at the Ploys first. Starting with strategic ploys. As is common for the elite marine teams, we have both double shoot and double fight. These are of course limited by whether or not you use the other action. Bolter Discipline also tries to clarify that it is related to any bolt weapons, as the Phobos have a bunch of different bolt options. Basically, as long as bolt is in the name, double shoot is possible. Vanguard saw a sizable buff and is probably going to be an always on kind of ploy for the team. It does 4 things. It ignores the first 2 inches used for climb, drop, or traverse during a move. It causes all jump tests to be passed. It adds 1 inch to the active character's movement. And now it allows the unit to make 1 mission or pickup action for 1 action point less. A massive boon to the team, as action point economy has always been hard with them. And They Shall Know No Fear prevents APL modifiers in basic injured states. Super injury still circumvents this. Deadly Shots was actually added a couple data slates ago as a new ploy. This one gives all bolt weapons the P1 rule that don't already have an APX or PX rule. Good for them since they are very limited with AP, which tends to be key in fighting other elite teams. The tactical ploys consist of 2 turn-based usable abilities and 2 pre-game abilities. Starting with Stealth Assault, this one has some prerequisites. For 1, the Phobos unit activating must not be in engagement range of an enemy. 2, they must activate with a conceal order. This does allow for you to change the order from engage to conceal as the unit activates to allow this. This provides 2 functions. The unit cannot shoot during its activation, but the unit is allowed to double strike with its first resolve successful hit step action. When resolving a successful hit, you can resolve another immediately after. Both these hits can be used as damage or parries. The trick with this is that the unit will have to use Guerrilla to change its order during the activation from conceal to engage to be allowed to charge. There are some narrative play functions that help with this, but we're focusing on regular matched play. This ploy is massive for Reavers, which are the Phobos melee bread and butter. Transhuman Physiology is a defensive ploy that allows you to upgrade a normal save to a critical save. Clutch in the right moment. For the pre-game ploys, 1 step ahead allows you to change one of your chosen units out for a different one. This might not seem good at first, but in sequence of play, finding out the makeup of your opponent's on-field team happens at the same time as your reveal. You can infer what they will choose from their faction choice and try and build to counter, but if they go off script and one of your options might not be as useful as one you didn't pick, this can be really helpful. Elite Reconnaissance gives you a couple options. You can either redeploy up to 2 units that have already been placed on the field within your drop zone, or you can select an additional scouting phase option to use. The redeploy is super useful in the right moments if you are able to trick your opponent into setting up to their disadvantage, and the extra scouting option can be very powerful, although it can't be an option you already picked. Across all of these ploys, there is a common theme of subterfuge and speed. All of these options pulled me into the Phobos, even before the recent buffs, and it was exciting to see the expansion to Vanguard this year. Let's press on and check the missions this team will try and complete to gain the tasty points needed for victory. Shock and Awe is fairly basic. It can be revealed whenever and is centered around taking enemy-controlled points. You have to do this over the course of at least 2 turning points, so you'll need to feel confident in your front line making its way across the board, but you'll also need to control how quickly you take these points. It could be worth letting the enemy keep a point that will be easy to snag later, but that can be risky when it comes to the final score. Saboteurs involves the team-wide Saboteur ability. Before the game begins, both players, starting with the opponent, take turns placing 3 tokens outside of 3 inches from the edge and 6 inches from your drop zone. And they must be touching terrain features, but not on vantage points. If the Phobos player can perform the Saboteur action on all 3 of these, they will get the 2 points for this. This can be a little bit hard mode, as the opponent can almost force you to have to dedicate a lot of your efforts onto one side of the board if you wish to even score this. Be wary of choosing this Tac-Op, as you will also need to spend action points to complete this on top of all the other things you will need these points for. Guerrilla Tactics is for the games where you feel your killing potential is pretty high. The goal is to bring down more enemy operatives than you lose over the turn, and for your team to be over half in conceal. Do this in 2 turning points and get the full score. I actually like this Tac-Op, but forcing yourself to have to incapacitate enemies can also be used against you in some matchups. This will also probably not be great against other elite teams where it will take some effort to bring down enemies. Now, let's take a look at the gear the Phobos will have access to in a match. Among the trinkets and baubles, there is the common grouping of items for the Astartes. Frag and crack grenades for all your indirect explosive needs, purity seals for when you may need to reroll without wanting to spend a command point. But beyond these, the Phobos stealth tactics and speed shine through. Throwing knives for when you want to strike from conceal with a chance at a great critical damage. Smoke grenades, usable from conceal and able to create a pillar of obscuring effect for any unit that has cover lines drawn through it. Very useful when paired with the multi-spectrum arrays of the Incursor Marines. Shock grenades, also usable from stealth and capable of reducing enemy APL for the turn. Then we get into the Reaver-specific gear. Super important to the overall mobility of this team. First up, the Grapnel Launcher. Any unit that is equipped with this gains 4 benefits. When climbing or descending terrain, the first 6 inches is treated as 2 inches. When choosing to climb, the unit does not need to be near a vertical terrain feature. This allows the unit to move up to vantage points that don't have walls beneath them, like ruins or catwalks. The unit is not limited to the 6-inch drop range from high up as most normal units are. Finally, when a unit drops, the distance counts as half. Extreme vertical mobility added to a unit that has even more mobility when you consider the second Reaver-only item. Grav chutes give Reavers a 4-inch movement with fly at the end of the scouting phase. Know that picking Recon normally doesn't add to this, as both Recon and Grav chute can only trigger if the unit is in your drop zone. On top of this, when the Reaver leaves a vantage point, so long as it ends its move lower than it started, it would be considered to have fly. Though grapnel launchers are very map specific, grav chutes tend to be very universally beneficial. These items make the Reavers key in the overall strategies for the Phobos team, which is a little obnoxious since you don't get any Reavers in the initial specialist box. But let's take a look at each of these units that make up the specialist heavy Phobos team. We'll break this down a little differently. The Phobos generally have 3 flavors: Infiltrators, Incursors, and Reavers. The Infiltrator and Incursor selection have a handful of specialists within them. The Reavers are a little more simple in their options. All of these units fit the elite role well with their stats: 6-inch movement, 3 APL, 1 GA, 3 defense, 3+ saves, and 12 wounds for the regular Marines, 13 for sergeants. All Infiltrators come with the Omni Scrambler team ability and tend to be equipped with Marksman Bolt carbines. Common bolter stats: 4 attacks, 3 up to hit, 3-4 damage line. Their specialty is the lethal 5 stat line. The Infiltrator Veteran carries a different weapon, however. The custom bolt carbine, allowing it to choose for each deployment 2 special rules it can gain from the list of Balanced, Lethal 5, No Cover, Mortal Wounds 1, P1, and Rending. Extreme adaptability from game to game, and unlike the rest of the fist-wielding Infiltrators, the Veteran brings a combat knife to the fight, giving it a bit more damage in close range. The Voxbreaker brings the usual Infiltrator kit in, but comes with a couple supportive abilities: a constant 6-inch aura that prevents enemies from rerolling attacks in either fighting or shooting, as well as a 1 action point ability to select 1 concealed enemy operative within 6 inches of it without the need for visibility, and then select 1 allied operative visible to it and within 3 inches, including the Voxbreaker itself. The concealed enemy is then treated as having an engage order for the rest of the turn when targeted by the chosen ally. The Saboteur brings a remote explosive to the fight. 4 attacks, 2 up to hit, 5-6 damage line, silent, and AP1. It has an action to plant this explosive within 1 inch and visible to it as long as the Saboteur is not in engagement range of an enemy. It can then use its shoot action to trigger this 3-inch explosion. Detonate cannot be used as an Overwatch attack. Using this powerful tool will take some experience, but with the help of the Omni Scrambler, it could be set up for some devastating combos. The Infiltrator Helix Adept is the medic of the Phobos, capable of preventing an allied unit's death within 3 inches of it. Also, for 1 action point, able to heal an ally within 1 inch of it for 2d3 lost wounds. A good pick when trying to manage a sustained fight. The Infiltrator Commsman comes with a key ability for many Phobos combos. It is able to make a visible ally perform a 1 AP action when it is not active. This is limited to actions that weren't taken yet and will limit them from using these actions during that turning point if they were to go after the Commsman. It is also limited from using movement-based actions as well. There is a warrior variant for the infiltrators, but as there are enough specialists to fill an active squad normally, this will see limited use as it has nothing special when compared to the rest of the grouping. The incursors all come with multi-spectrum arrays and normally carry Oculus bolt carbines, giving their bolters the no cover rule. Most of them come with combat blades as well, to be a little better than the average infiltrator counterpart. The Incursor Marksman brings its fists, however, as well as an improved Stalker Marksman bolt carbine with it. 4 attacks, 2+ to hit, 3/4 damage line, as well as AP 1 and lethal 5. Devastating, especially when paired with the track target action. For 1 action point, you can set the marksman into a sort of guard state. If an enemy operative performs an action, the marksman can choose to fire an overwatch at it. Even if the marksman is in conceal, this will still trigger, changing the marksman to engage. They consider the overall action to be a shoot action with the bolt weapon. So when Bolter Discipline is active, you can fire a full volley and then enter this mode if you want. The Incursor Mine Layer comes with the Haywire Mine. It can be planted for 1 action point and is set as a one-off motion-activated attack. If an enemy operative moves within 3 inches of this mine, it triggers a volley of 4 attacks, 2 up to hit, 2/4 damage line, lethal 5 with no cover. This does not need line of sight to be checked, as the target is always valid. If a critical hit is retained from these attacks, the target cannot move any further for its activation and can lose 1 usable action point from its current pool. If that unit hasn't activated yet, the 1 action point will be removed when it goes. This does not affect the overall APL stat, however. Outside of these 2 specialists, there are only warriors for the regular Marines. If you are looking to make a full squad, you will need at least 3 of these past the specialist units. Not bad if you plan on leaning heavily into smoke plays or the field has a lot of obscuring cover. The regular Reaver units only bring warriors. These can either field bolt carbines and their fists, or special issue bolt pistols and a combat blade. As these tend to be the front line, the melee focused option is usually key, and the bolt pistol's AP 1, as well as the combat blade's 5 attacks with its 4/5 damage line, does fairly well in close range, especially when paired with the stealth assault ploy. All 3 subsections of the Phobos have their sergeants. These tend to have access to the basic warrior loadouts with the improved weapon skill and ballistic skill and wound count that sergeants bring. The key benefit is their special action, Strategize. For 1 action point, as long as you are over 3 inches away from an enemy operative, your team gains a command point. Very useful for a team with as many good options as the Phobos have. It will put strain on how much a sergeant can do in a turn, but remember, the Commsman can trigger unique actions for allies it can see. If your Reaver Sergeant is getting ready to bring the pain to the front line, it might be good to get the command point through way of the Commsman. These are the soldiers, and oddly enough, I already talked about how to build a competitive tournament roster in my How to Kill Team Building a List video. I'll link that in the cards and below in the description. If you wish to see how that works, we go over it there. This lets us get right into a couple combo ideas. First up, a Saboteur Commsman combo. This is but one of several ways the Saboteur can use its explosive. The turn has just started, and the Saboteur finds itself within 9 inches of a big enemy unit. Vanguard is used for the Ploys, and the large threat is targeted to be unable to perform actions for several activations due to multiple Omni-Scramblers on the team. For opening action, the Saboteur, still in conceal, leaps the barricade for free and beelines it towards the target. For one action point, it places its explosive 1 inch away towards the enemy. Not wanting to get caught in the blast, it dashes away, ensuring that it is outside the 3-inch range. The opponent goes, but is unable to move its heavy unit, having been scrambled. The following activation will have the commsman, in sight of the saboteur, trigger the detonate action. As the remote explosives are considered silent, this shoot action can be taken from conceal, causing tremendous damage to this integral target. Throughout the course of this, neither the commsman nor the saboteur need to leave conceal if they don't want to. Another interesting concept comes from obscuring abuse and the incursor marksman. The multi-spectrum array prevents obscuring from affecting the marksman's cover lines. This also means that the marksman can abuse nearby heavy cover. By positioning behind it outside of 2 inches, the marksman ensures that any return fire will be obscured as well. This would allow the marksman to exist in an engaged state throughout the entirety of the game while laying down cover fire without any recourse. These are but 2 useful strategies that can be applied using blends of Phobos specialists. The Phobos have received many enhancements since release, and now truly feel like they are in a good spot to hold their own easily in most situations. The trick with them is to focus on your own experience and use that to determine the best tools in the Phobos toolbox to be used in any situation. They're not as blunt and to the point as their intercessor allies, but if you find yourself to be more mischief-minded, the Phobos is an elite team that could be right up your alley. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I covered enough here to give you confidence in your approach to the Phobos, either as their commander or their opponent. Maybe you have some fun Phobos facts to share and wouldn't mind leaving them in the comments below. You could even join our community Discord, where we talk about tactics and show off our projects, as well as keep updated with the goings-on of the Chimerix project. And as always, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Chimerix, and I'll see you in the next one.